Welcome to another video from the Barrett channel. I'm sitting here, it's the middle of December, but it's still over 20 degrees, it's lovely. I'm just taking 5 and sitting outside Starbucks having a coffee. By the way, that reminds me, thank you, a massive thank you to all those people who are supporting the channel through Buy Me a Coffee. If you want to check it out, the link's down below. Okay, so the title and subject of today's video is China is getting smarter. What do I mean by that? What I actually mean is that the education of Chinese people is getting better. Before I go into it a little more, let's just rewind 40 years. Back in 1978, the then leader Deng Xiaoping introduced some reforms to kickstart the Chinese economy. Back in those days, the economy, the GDP of the economy was around $150 billion. After those reforms, for the first few years, it ticked along, rising a little bit, and then sort of in 2004, 2005, it started to take off massively. For many of the years after that, it was growing at double digits, as much as 14-15% in some years. And that's a massive achievement. Today the Chinese economy is well over $13 trillion, second only to the US. Now, I personally believe that there's a number of factors that have caused that to happen. One, having a one-party government which has been stable. And I've got another video about that, so if you want to check out the link up here, you're more than welcome to. Secondly, the hard work of the Chinese people. And I intend to make a video about that. Their work ethic is just unbelievable. But the thing I want to talk about today is the education of the Chinese people. I think that, many years ago, maybe as early as that, China recognized that the way to make their economy and their country strong was to have a well-educated population. Back in those days, in the 70s, I guess much of China's population was not that well educated. But since that sort of time, since the early 1980s, there's over 6 million Chinese students gone to study abroad. And many of those students have returned to China after their studies. And even the ones that haven't have ended up working in many of the foreign, tech companies abroad. And I noticed as well here is that a lot of the students, they don't study softer degrees. They study a lot of the sort of STEM subjects, language, maths, sciences, engineering. And I really believe this is what's really contributed to making China a strong economy, because they have this huge army of mathematicians, engineers, scientists. And this has really pushed their economy forward, and especially now you're seeing that pay off in spades in the technology sector. Now, I know a lot of you will sort of start saying, oh yeah, but they've stolen their technology from other companies. So I just have a couple of points I'd like to address there. I've no doubt that China have stole some technology from other countries, but I would say that so have probably every other country in the world during the stage of their development. And I remember being in the UK back in the 60s and 70s, the same kind of thing was said about Japan. Japan were masters. They bought products from the West. They took them back to Japan. They reverse engineered them, and then they built them themselves. So reverse engineering is another form of stealing technology. But not so much criticism was ever leveled at Japan for that. Another point I'd like to address is, for example, high-speed trains here in China. Many Westerners say, oh, but they stole that technology from other countries. But actually they didn't. When the contracts were put up to a number of foreign countries, Germany, Japan, for these high-speed rail networks that China wanted, it was clearly stated in those contracts that the companies who got involved must transfer that technology to China during that process. Now, those companies could have refused, but they were rewarded handsomely financially for the transfer of that technology. So you could argue that technology wasn't stolen at all, it was purchased by the Chinese. But what subsequently happened, the Chinese, put that technology to use building their infrastructure. Again, infrastructure is another massive thing which has benefited their economy. They've had the foresight to build massive infrastructure here. But just going back to the railways, they've evolved that high-speed train technology. They've reverse engineered it. They've got the knowledge from other companies around the world, and they've made it better. So it stands today that China have got 25,000 plus kilometers of some of the most technologically advanced high-speed trains in the world. Probably only Japan sort of competes with them, but still it has nowhere near the amount that China has. So going back to the education, not only do they send all these students abroad to study in many of the best universities around the world, England, America, Australia, Russia, etc. They have some very good universities here. So each year they have a huge amount of graduates graduating to go into their technology companies. And even before they get to university, if you look at recent studies by the OECD, Chinese secondary students are, topping the world league tables with their achievements. Their level is far outstripping many Western countries. And in fact, if you look at a lot of Western countries, the OECD did some data on the USA, and it shows even though the USA have spent huge amounts of money on their education system, the standard of education has not risen in the last 20 years. And that's in stark contrast to what's happened in China. Certainly in many of the tier 1 major cities in China, the levels that have been achieved by students are very, very good. And even before they get to school, I live in Shenzhen, which is a first tier city. I suspect all the other first tier cities are similar. They have private kind of education centres that many of the parents send their kids to. And, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen many of these education centres sprouting up. So they've always had language. But there's many more now which are teaching kind of coding and AI and mathematics kind of skills. In fact, I went to one the other day and they're using this educational Lego, and they're teaching 3, 4, 5-year-olds how to code and about artificial intelligence concepts. So I really see by doing this, they are really preparing their students for the digital age. And I think the issue that many Western countries are going to have is that China have realized that this is going to be a big thing in the future, which is a big driver of the economy. And I see in the news, today I see that Germany have passed some new laws because they're realizing they have a big shortage of skilled workers. So they've just passed some new laws to allow it much easier for foreign workers to go and work in Germany, because they're very concerned about the growth of their economy. And many organisations around the world have reported how having this highly educated or a lot of high education within your population will pay back in spades in the coming years. I'll just give you couple of examples of this, real world examples in China. I've been coming to China for 12, 13 years or more, and I've spent a lot of time here in that period. And, you know, going back 6, 7 years, I saw that many Chinese, they would never buy Chinese branded iPhones. Maybe some of the older population would, but many of the young and middle-aged people wouldn't touch Chinese-made smartphones. They were seen to be poor quality. They were lacking, you know, they were way behind the features of Samsung and Apple at the time. But I've seen, you know, if you go back that sort of 4 or 5 years, you know, Apple would bring out a new phone. It had all the latest cutting edge technology in it, camera technology, you know, all the phone technology. But I've noticed that in the last 4 years, 3 years, that many Chinese brands of phone now are at the cutting edge. And it seems Apple have become a follower, not a leader. You know, Apple and Samsung here have lost massive market share. In fact, Samsung have just closed their last Chinese manufacturing plant because their market share within the Chinese market is so small now. You have brands like Vivo, Oppo, Xiaomi, Huawei, OnePlus, and these are the brands now that are bringing out the latest cutting edge phones, you know. They're often the companies that introduce features a year now, maybe even 18 months before Apple and Samsung. Another great example is DJI. DJI are a drone maker. They also make cameras. They've just brought out an action camera. In fact, we use a number of their cameras. We use their drone for a lot of our videos. In the space of 7 or 8 years, they now command probably a 75 to 80% share of the worldwide, both commercial and consumer drone market. There is just no way that other companies are being able to compete with them. And this is a result of having, you know, many smart people available for them to employ, which many Western economies just don't have. So what does this mean for the future? Well, I think unless Western countries are, you know, start investing big and quickly into educating their population or recruiting engineers, scientists, AI engineers, coders, they're really going to start falling behind. And again, today I was reading a report by some organization in America, and in fact I will make a video about that shortly because the report was very interesting. That was saying that, you know, if America don't very quickly start spending and investing a huge amount into artificial intelligence, they're going to start falling even further behind where China currently are. So I think the conclusion I draw from this is that because China have invested and continue to invest lots of money in their education of their population. In fact, currently they spend about 4% of GDP on education, which is much more than many other countries. But I think because they've done that, it's going to make sure their economy continues to power ahead. And I'm pretty sure it will technologically overtake many Western countries in the very near future. You know, you really are starting to see that happen, and I think it's a big scary thought for American country, for other world countries, especially America, that have dominated for the last 30, 40 years in technology, that they now have a challenger. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the video for today. I'd really like to hear your thoughts and comments, so please comment down below. I really find it very interesting to see the comments from many different perspectives, and I really like engaging with those comments to you know, show some of the differences here in China to the West. And as always, if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. It really helps our channel. If generally you like our content, please hit that subscribe button. Again, we're a new channel and we want to expand to get conversation flowing, get dialogue flowing. So please hit that subscribe button. And if you're really into us and you want to be notified as soon as we get a new video up, please hit the bell. But anyway, as always, take care.